Hi, everyone. Welcome and thanks so much for joining. On today's webinar, Harnessing Spec Management to Drive PLM at Bob Evans Farms, we'll be diving into the power of a spec-first approach for food and beverage companies across the world. My name is Megan Billingsley, and I'm excited to moderate this discussion today. Without further ado, let's jump into it. We are thrilled to be joined today by two incredible industry experts, Matthew Wright and Patrick Kurilla. Matthew Wright is the founder and CEO of Spec, the first cloud-based platform for specification management. Spec has been recognized by Fast Company's prestigious Most Innovative Companies list, named a Gartner Cool Vendor, and is one of the top places to work by the OC Register and built in LA. Wright is also a published author, and his book, The Evolution of Products in Packaging, was named to the Amazon Hot New Release list for industrial relations business and has a 5-star rating. Prior to founding Spec, Wright spent more than 25 years in the packaging industry, holding leadership positions at International Paper, Temple Inland, and Wright Pack, a packaging company he co-founded. He has also been involved in leading multiple M&A deals in the packaging industry, currently sits on the MSU School of Packaging and Industry Advisory Board, and previously served on the Packaging Advisory Board at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. And joining Matthew is Patrick Kurilla. Patrick is a passionate food enthusiast with a background in science. After a brief culinary career as a sous chef, he found his perfect blend of food and science in the food manufacturing industry. Here he began working as an entry-level QA technician at T. Marzetti and working to the ranks for over 10 years. He then joined Bob Evans Farms as a specifications and design QA manager and has since worked his way into his current role of senior specifications manager with the R&D group, taking responsibility for the technical function of the system. This role involves close collaboration on the design, build, and implementation of a customized system, including a complex integration with the nutrition development application Genesis. Patrick will lead the integration of Spec with the industry's largest standardized data pool, One World Sync, enabling automatic publication of product specification data to retailers such as Kroger, Albertsons, and Walmart. Matthew, Patrick, thanks so much for joining us today. Before I hand it off, just a quick overview of what you can expect. First, Matthew and Patrick will walk us through a brief overview of the spec management fundamentals. Then we'll break down the challenges we see specifically in the food and beverage industry, dive into Bob Evans Farms with a general overview as well as their Spec case study. And finally, they'll wrap up with a discussion on the value of specification management. And with that, I'll hand it off to the experts to get us started.
Great, thank you, Megan. That was a really nice introduction and set the stage for where we're headed next for this discussion. I think it really starts with the founding story, and it's quite unique to have founded a software company with the background of packaging, as you mentioned. Over 25 years in the packaging space, that typically would be the continued forward momentum. However, one of the interesting things in being in the packaging space is that you get to see so many different things made, so many different companies and products going to market. And the value that that was able to provide for the foundation of the software was I really saw that all these great companies were struggling with the same type of issues. Having been in hundreds of different food and beverage manufacturing facilities, CPG facilities, I really was understanding the user and the operational people and the challenges they were having with getting product to market. This was only starting to rise as complexity, which we'll talk about in a minute, with regulatory sustainability and other things really growing at a rapid pace. I wanted to be impactful. I wanted to help these people do their job better. And that was the foundation of starting Spec, the first specification management platform focused on industry and getting product to market. I don't think this slide will surprise anybody. We know historically the data is everywhere. Part of that is because of the origin of product. I always explain that product was here long before technology. And so as technology came, it started to gather pieces of the information. We know there's a really heavy reliance on vendors for a lot of information for packaging, even for ingredients. And then obviously the companies that are making product are bringing that all together. Some of the things that are used are workflows, other systems to try to make this all come together. But we know it's a lot of project work. People typically look at getting new product to market as a project or answering questions about regulatory as a project, kind of with a front and an end. And sometimes it can take months to do very simple tasks. That's because, again, this data is everywhere. And worse is this data is duplicated, which we'll cover in a minute. So you really don't know where to trust your data source from. So to me, as I sat back and looked at those hundreds of different companies that I had the pleasure of doing work with and doing business with and helping them get product to market, what I realized was what everybody was struggling with was, I think, the most important and fundamental piece of the data stream, which is the specification. The specification is the foundation of everything. A specification is really defining everything. So it's soil, it's water, it's the packaging, it's the product, it's the ingredients. And then bringing all this together to create the product in the end. The specification has to detail all the stuff that's necessary to buy it and source it. And at the same time that you're using that data to buy and source or to bring your product together is the same data that can help you understand your regulatory, sustainability, and other parts of your landscape, including quality. So I look at it as somewhat of a building block. You pull these specs, you don't duplicate them, and you connect them to create whatever you're trying to create. Typically, technology and the information flow we have today, again, which we'll cover kind of how it's being managed today, really is captured at the end, captured at the finished goods, because again, historically, computers really look to take care of the BOM or the finished good in an ERP system and other systems. And so for me, and specification management, it really is a simplistic view that the spec is the most important data source there is. So how are specifications being managed today? Again, I think most people watching this is probably very aware of how their specifications are managed today. Again, this is the granular DNA level data, the material, the type of printing, the type of moisture content. All these things are part of a specification defining a product. What's interesting, if you look at the survey that we've done every year and the left to right axis, and you add all those numbers up, it's well over 200%. Well, what is that telling you? The same data is duplicated through multiple different systems. And we know today that there's no way that you can effectively push a button and do something with data that's in multiple spots. You have to go back and see which data is correct. Which data can I rely on? Which parts of the data can I rely on? And bring that together. And that's where we see companies that have created hundreds of process steps to get product to market, because they want to make sure that they're not capturing or grabbing the wrong piece of data. We see time and time again on recalls, the label was wrong or something was wrong. And obviously that was probably because there was duplicated data. We're going to talk a little bit in a minute about how we can streamline that, how we can not only have one source of data, but really the visibility tools all together and connected. So obviously, if this is how your specifications are managed, it's very hard to move quickly, very high risk of having issues, and ultimately recalls and sustainability regulatory is going to be caused from this. And lastly, I think the most important thing in this slide is the ineffectiveness of what we call the network. And the network for specifications today, as people are doing it, is email. We've done studies and we see that sometimes it can take up to 500 different emails, which is highly ineffective and really fraught with problems in getting product to market. And it really should not be the way it is today with technology that's available. Well, are the challenges getting easier or harder? You know, I talked about when I founded Spec, right, that the beginning of the challenges were coming. You know, I always say through industry, we've always felt there were difficult challenges, but think about the massive amount of challenges ahead of us today. You look at regulatory, and regulatory for the right reasons, wanting to get secure and safe food to the market. The consequences are much greater today. Historically, if you had a problem with a product that got to market, you'd do a simple recall, kind of pull it back. If it wasn't important, you might just change it for the next time around if it was a labeling condition. Today, you can't do that. You don't have the ability to just fix it later. You have an instantaneous feedback loop from the public about things and problems that can be instantaneously hurtful to your brand. We know that the regulatory landscape is only going to get harder. And what we've seen from sustainability is that not only states are acting differently, but country to country are acting differently. So what I look at is like a lens. You have this very vast and changing lens in front of you for what's expected. The only way to kind of be able to manage through that is to have a very finite and structured set of data behind it. So you can visualize through what I call the lens, how are you doing against regulatory? How are you doing against sustainability? And what we're finding is more and more companies are beginning to become aware that really what answers these questions is data. I always say that sustainability, regulatory, consumer expectations is a data problem. And having the right data and being able to visualize that instantly is what's critical in these challenges. We've done some studies on the consumers' thoughts about regulation, sustainability, and their belief that the companies are doing it. And there's a low level of belief. And part of that is, again, because we're not able to share data. We're going to talk in a minute about our integration with Genesis and the value of that. But think about that food panel that we use for decision-making in our consumption of products. Oftentimes, we may pick one or two areas that we look at personally and focus on. I know calories, and you can go right to it and look at it and make a yes or no decision. But ultimately, that's what the type of data and the visibility of data that we're going to have to get to make sure that consumers are comfortable. And again, you layer that on top of this really challenging landscape of supply chain and multicultural conversations about ingredients and food and taste that we want to do, is only leading to the complexity and the SKU explosion that we've seen over the last 20 years. And that's only growing as more and more companies are trying to stop it. So really, where does the specification fall in what I call the tech stack? Most companies have plenty of systems. And arguably, a lot of them probably would say the systems don't work like they want them to. The other passion I have in coming from industry in developing software is that the software is really inherited and user-friendly. I look at consumer-based technology and how easy it is for us to work with that. And that's the passion to drive business technology the same way. If I was to open a map app on my phone right now, it would recommend probably the 3 places I go at this time of day, and I can pick the one that I need to go to. That's how quick it can be. In industry, we'll still kind of go in and calling through the maps and the pages and looking for the way to get to the place we need to go to. So with that in mind, specifications are the core fundamental beginning of the technology stack. What I like to say is it's really the not beautiful data that sits underneath everything, but it is so powerful. And all the outcomes are driven from that. Whether it's quality, it's regulatory, sustainability, it's a procurement, all that comes off the specification data management data set. And then it acts as a PLM for food and beverage and CPG companies, or it can link into historical PLMs for industry, which may have more beginning and end process. It definitely can couple with your ERP systems. I look at integrations bilaterally, they're really important. We're going to talk about the Genesis integration here in a minute, how that can, with one finger touch, impact multiple systems and give you one pure outcome. These are the types of technology relationships that we have to have in order to overcome today's challenges. I'm really excited to introduce Patrick and let him tell you a little bit about the Bob Evans story today.
Thanks, Matthew. I really appreciate that introduction and the opportunity to be telling our story. So I'll jump right into a little bit about Bob Evans Farms. We operate a refrigerated retail business. We do a number of sausage products. We do a number of sides products like mashed potatoes and mac and cheese. We do some breakfast items like liquid eggs and processed potatoes. And then we also have started getting into meal kits recently with our Wanderlish brand. Bob Evans Farms originally existed as restaurants before it started to get into the retail business. And then a number of years ago went through a demerger where the restaurant business was actually sold off separately from the retail business. At that time, we were acquired by Post Holdings and became kind of the leader in the refrigerated retail space, which is what this slide is showing. You can see a number of our brands that we operate here through that business. For the last 20 years, we've been using basically a homegrown solution to manage our specifications. And it's basically an in-house developed online access database that really, frankly, has been managed extremely well. It just lacks a little bit of power to really keep up with the demands from our business. recently we identified Genesis as a good addition to our system landscape for developing nutritional information. And so we knew that we had the information we have some of the calculation capability we need for nutrition development. We just really still don't have the kind of standardization and the one-stop shop that we needed in a PLM. So it was at that time when we knew that we had to start initiating a project to find the kind of the next phase solution for our data management needs. And that was SpecRite. After looking at several solutions, we landed on SpecRite actually initially to implement a digital asset management process, right, to manage our artwork and to govern how we approve and communicate die lines with graphic vendors. So we had already kind of had the experience with SpecRite. We knew we liked the platform. It's intuitive. It's easy to use. So we said, okay, well, let's go ahead and go down the PLM path. It seems like there would be a lot of synergy between digital asset management and PLM. And so that's what we did. Having just recently integrated Genesis, we knew that we needed to maintain the calculating capability of that system for our nutrition, especially starting to get into some more complicated products like the meal kits that we're getting into. So, and we wanted to reduce the number of duplicate efforts on the part of our developers. So the need to manage and maintain information in multiple systems that might be redundant, essentially. And so we started thinking through, what an integration with a system like Genesis is going to look like and how that's going to work with SpecRite. And what we came up with was frankly kind of a rather Dedalian process flow, which involved kind of back and forth transactions of information between Genesis and SpecRite. And ultimately, the goal was we knew that we didn't want to manage ingredient specifications in multiple places. We wanted to be able to put them into one system and then have the nutritional information basically pulled over in the SpecRite. And then for those ingredients to be available to our developers to basically pick and assign end formula at whatever percent contribution they are working on, right? So that really allows us to manage in one spot the ingredients and then have the developers work solely in SpecRite for all of our formulation needs, and to have the nutrition facts panel through Genesis calculation and image development be available at the time of basically setting the percent formula. This is really pretty powerful. It really puts a lot of the item, not just formula, but finished good management into the hands of the product developer. And so we feel really good about the work we've done, and been really impressed with the integration team with SpecRite. And we think we've come up with a pretty creative and pretty effective solution. So, kind of having this beginning to end process that's really helping our developers be as powerful and as agile as they need to be. We think through, what's next with our instance of SpecRite, and where do we need to use this information? Where does this information need to go? And we kind of already knew the answer to that, right? We need to publish it to our our customers, and we currently do that through One World Sync, the industry's largest data pool. So we said, well, if we have the integration with Genesis, why not integrate One World Sync? And we knew that this would be a little different because One World Sync is an external solution. It's not an in-house application. So we didn't know what kind of challenges that was going to present. And so far, it really has not presented any challenges. It's actually quite more simple than the integration with Genesis. But this is going to basically allow us to do everything from managing an ingredient specification, the nutrition per 100 grams of an ingredient, all the way through the nutrition per serving and percent daily value of the finished good, all the way to publishing information to our customers and the retailers that sell our products. We're excited about that piece coming up, and we're already working on what next steps are for kind of our Spec Right story. We're looking at integrating a new item setup process that currently exists in Office 365 into the system, kind of an item change or specification change management / notification system, and Spec Right through workflows, and trying to move away from siloed processes through various applications in our network. So I'd say overall we're excited about where we've ended up. We're definitely in a place of increased and realized standardization compared to where we were with our data, and excited for the next steps with Spec Right.
Well, thank you, Patrick. I really appreciate that overview, and it fits so well into what I started with which is really solving the real problems. We see, Bob Evans Foods has such amazing brands and so much variety, which again is around that whole SKU challenges. At the same time, challenge with getting the data together and connected. And really love the story of the multi-integrations with Genesis and OneSync, and onward from there, and what your ideas are. But that's really how you can put your fingertips on data and be actionable. And then lastly, the last slide we saw was a quick snapshot of the dashboard, and that certainly is much more like modern technology than we typically see in industry, and very actionable. So thank you for that. And so as we kind of move into, well, how do you begin, or where does this journey start from, and kind of where does it go to? I see the first box as chaos, and it doesn't mean that your business is in chaos. Generally, companies are doing amazing things, prior to Spec Right. They're getting product to market, delighting customers, but it's really that chaotic landscape of how you bring that specification about, or how you do these types of things in your business and day-to-day life. So that's the part of chaos. And then it goes to static. I was sharing the stage with another great food company last week, and I really loved what he said, which is, data management is not static documents like share folders or share drives. Data has to be live, has to be actionable, has to be at your fingertips at all times. And this data should be accurate and actionable and connected, as we just talked about, having multiple systems talking off the same data schema. And then it's fun when you start to move into dynamic, and that's kind of what you're starting to hear from Patrick, was dynamic heading towards strategic. And now, as we kind of got through the dynamic stage, which is where he left off, now they're starting to look strategically. Where else does this apply? Or where else this can be fitting into their business unit, and really starting to change the business outcomes by the way they bring this technology to bear. And then where I'm spending a lot of time, which is really fun, is the intelligence level, which is where we become proactive. My vision is you wake up, you turn on your dashboard, and it tells you what's going on around your supply chain. It tells you what's possibly a challenge with some of your products out there, and has a very actionable, deliberate messaging for you, very much like we engage, again, with technology in the rest of our life. So not only we talk about these business challenges that food, bev, CPG are under today, and so this isn't really just about trying to help accomplish those challenges today and kind of put a pin in it. It's really trying to move your business forward despite those challenges. how do we reduce the risk of recalls, even on top of higher regulatory and compliance issues? How do we make sure that our suppliers are in compliance? How do we automate that system? How do we bring documents in and intelligent document processing so we can have a look at those documents the minute they touch us and not worry about it months and weeks later? We're processing hundreds of thousands of documents and digitizing that data outcome, and then comparing that again to the digital spec. And then ultimately, as SKU proliferation rises, waste normally rises with that. But how do we actually take it as SKUs grow and reduce the waste instead of increasing the waste? And so again, getting better than what we were previously. And ultimately, speed is everything. For companies like Bob Evans that have a lot of great brands, a loyal customer base, it's about how do we get those products to market as fast as we can? Because the faster companies get product to market, obviously the better the returns and the better they know the successes and lean into those. So we're not looking at just solving today's problems, but actually helping the business do better. And I'm so proud and excited to just see a small sampling here of some of our food and beverage CPG customers. We look at really a great variety of amazing companies, amazing products. We consume these products daily, and amazing people behind these products, just like we heard from Patrick, so driven and passionate about making his company better, a great background with just food loving from beginning. And that's what I've experienced in hundreds of different facilities I go through, is this great engaged champion that really wants to do better and wants to be able to spend their time making better products that really appease to the customers and make them happy. At the same time, with the challenge in regulation, sustainability, and everything else that's on their plate. I'm really excited about making our customers more successful in their business endeavors. And so really enjoyed sharing this with you all today. And I'll hand it back over to you, Megan.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Matthew and Patrick, for such an insightful presentation. Before we sign off, I do have a few questions that I'd like to walk through for our viewers. Starting with Patrick, what advice would you give other companies who are hesitant to rethink their current tools and processes?
Yeah, I would say, it always behooves a company to explore new options, right? I think that with the ever-changing landscape around capability and systems and the drive to standardize through one solution is strong, and I think that's something that Spec does well, and what we've learned through their ability to be flexible and integrate with other systems. I would say it probably warrants at least a demonstration, right?
Perfect, thank you. Matthew, you had talked about cost savings and sustainability. Can you give an example of how you can drive both?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a talk track that I really believe in. And I think it's starting to actually percolate more and more common conversation. Historically, I think we always looked at those two things as against each other or potentially against each other. And there may be scenarios like that. But you look at, in both definitions, less is better, right? So in sustainability, less is better. It doesn't really matter if you're starting from 1 pound, you go down to 0.8 of a pound, that's better, right? And so that's leaning towards sustainability. And the same thing with procurement and buying materials. If you can buy less materials in general, it's better bottom line. So I think if we continue to look for things like that, where I call them a 2-for-1, very possible. We've seen customers doing it all the time. And then really a part that we don't talk a lot about, which is just the elimination of waste or mistakes, and how much is that impacting sustainability. If you look at what companies' allowable waste metrics are, and if we can attack those, that obviously hits the bottom line because you're not throwing away product, and it also helps your sustainability initiative. So I do believe they can work together in a lot of cases.
Excellent, thank you. And last question, Patrick, what has been the biggest value add from implementing SpecRite?
Definitely the standardization. I mean, we were coming from, like I had mentioned, kind of a fragmented situation where our data was strewn across quite a few different applications, locations, silos, And I mean, even down to things like naming conventions for, like a formula or packaging or ingredient, components. Just having a spot to consolidate, having a spot to standardize, having a spot to really put, some of these policies in place through, housing process and housing convention. I'd say that's definitely where the value is.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for a great session today. And thank you, our audience, for joining. Today's webinar will remain available on demand if you want to review anything that was discussed. Thanks again for watching.